No, you can't kill Santa Claus. It's not home defense. He's not like a regular intruder. Hello, my friends. Hello, and welcome once again to stately Vaughan Manor, where it's time for my weekend reading report. That's right. My weekend reading report returns after 2 weeks because of, nonsense. We don't like a lot of nonsense around here, Roger. So, yes, my weekend reading report where I talk about all the stuff that I read during the previous week. I read a couple things, even though it's been really, really busy, and there was another storm, and the sump pumps that pump all the water off the manor, one of them broke down yesterday, and I had to fix it like I do every winter, and I got all soaking wet because water is falling from the sky. I really don't like the whole idea of rain. I know they say we need it, but really, it's kind of ridiculous. Anyway, back to the things that I read the previous week, or this previous week, or 2 weeks, I guess. Okay, what did I read anyway? Okay, well, going to the never-ending list. It's a 500 book list. The 500 books that I must read before I'll buy any new books. I have to read 500 books I already own before I'll buy any new books. It's the 500 book challenge that's been going on for 2 years. Over 2 years now. And book number 204. What was book number 204? That was this book. Yes, it's H.P. Lovecraft, a Ver Aurum edition. Volume 1, 1905 to 1925. This is the collected fiction of H.P. Lovecraft, which I am reading for the holiday season to get into the holiday spirit. There is an event, Cthulhu for Christmas, or Cthulhu on Christmas, or Cthulhu Christmas. It's one of those things. It's one of those booktube events where you read an H.P. Lovecraft story on Christmas, which is proper. And I decided, you know what, I'm going to read all of H.P. Lovecraft this holiday season. And I read this. This is his early work, H.P. Lovecraft's early work. And so this has some of his worst stories in it. There are a couple really stinky stories in here. This has some of his best stories in here. There are a couple genuine masterpieces, I think, in this volume. And a bunch of other stories which are mostly good. Better than I remember them being, actually. And a couple of them, I think, are still pretty underrated. A couple of the stories in this volume. I had a great time reading it. Whenever I had the chance to read, I had a great time reading it. But just going through some of the highlights. This, of course, had Dagon, the very short story, which is the first Cthulhu Mythos story, which was good. A short little thing, but it was good. This, like I said, this does have a couple of his worst stories that he ever wrote. And I'm pretty sure The Street is in here, is his worst story. It's just terrible from beginning to end. And it has this thing that H.P. Lovecraft had, where he had like the calamitous ending where everything just came crashing down. It's like, and then everything came crashing down. And he does that a few times in the stories in this volume. And The Street is probably the worst offender. Although even a good story like, where is that? I think that story's in here. The Picture in the House. Yeah, even The Picture in the House has an ending like that. And that's otherwise a pretty good story. But as far as bad stories go, so you had that. You had The Horror at Red Hook, which actually has some things in it that are good. So it's not all around terrible. Not one of his best, but it actually has some good moments in that story, as incomprehensible as it is. And then it all came crashing down at the end. But it has He in here, which is a terrible story. It's just awful. But otherwise, there's a lot of good stuff in here. Herbert West Reanimator, which is one of my favorite stories. It's just good, pulpy fun. The Lurking Fear is in here, another good, pulpy story. There are some stories that I think are better than people give them credit for, like The Hound. I enjoy The Hound. The Hound has a lot of H.P. Lovecraft's humor in it. And he did have a sense of humor, and that is apparent in The Hound, which is just an all-around good story, I think. I think it's excellent. And we had The Unnameable, which is fun. We had some stories which are just okay, like The Nameless City and The Quest of Ironon. We had some dream, kind of like stories that take place in his dream worlds. Most of them are pretty interesting. And there are a couple, like I said, just plain out masterpieces, like The Outsider. That's a story of his that's very short, that's been anthologized to death. You'll find The Outsider in a million anthologies. And it's because it's so good. It's just such a brilliant little story. Just perfectly done. And then, of course, we have The Rats in the Walls, which is just a masterpiece of horror. It's just great. The Rats in the Walls. Creepy, one of his creepiest stories, and one of his earlier ones. So, mostly really, really excellent stuff in here, with a couple of stinkers. There are a couple of stinkers, but a lot of really interesting stuff in here, watching H.P. Lovecraft develop as a writer. Now, the next volume I'll be reading from Lovecraft, which I'll probably be starting later on this week, is this one, Volume 2, 1926 to 1930. And this is when we start getting into the really, really good stuff. In fact, I think this starts off with Cool Air and The Call of Cthulhu. So, Call of Cthulhu. That's just a brilliant story right there. But you also have a lot of other really excellent things, like the Dunwich Horrors in here, The Whisper in Darkness is in here. But we also have a couple of his short novels. The Dream Quest of Unknown Kadath, which is another story I think is underrated. Just a weird fantasy story taking place in the dream realms. And The Case of Charles Dexter Ward, which exists only in a single draft. It was just like this thing he wrote a draft of, put it in a drawer, and forgot about it. And it was later discovered and published. And it's excellent. I mean, for something that he just wrote just to see if he could write a novel and then just stashed it away and didn't think of it again. I mean, for something like that, it's an excellent story. But it's been a while since I read it. It's been a while since I read most of the stories in this volume. So, it's been years, actually. So I look forward to reading this. This is going to be fun. Holiday, festive fun. So that was that. And right now, what am I reading? Well, I started for Roger's Cheap Old Book Club, the cheapest book club around. Everything in Roger's Book Club, Roger's Cheap Old Book Club, is available for free on Project Gutenberg. And right now I'm reading Herman Melville's Typee, which was his first novel, although it's an autobiographical novel, and it was originally published as a piece of nonfiction, I believe, because it's based on his own experience. I've gotten conflicting reports about how much of this is his actual experience and how much he made up. It seems like a lot of it is true, but maybe some of it isn't so true. Like I said, I've gotten conflicting reports, but I can tell you it's an excellent read. I've read 10 chapters of it so far. I will read a lot more of it today and tomorrow because I'll have some time to read for a change, and maybe knock out the book today or tomorrow. But it's really, really good. An excellent choice, Roger, for your Cheap Old Book Club. It is not the masterpiece, perhaps, that Moby Dick is. It's more of a straight narrative about his experiences among the Typee after he went AWOL from the whaling vessel he was on. It's really gripping stuff. And so I'm really enjoying it, and so I should finish it up. So I'll be able to talk more about it next week after I've read the whole book. But it's excellent, and really I should have expected it to be excellent, and I did because Herman Melville wrote it. So yeah, Typee. Good stuff, Roger. So I'm reading that right now. That is the book I'm reading right now. But of course, I'm also reading Varney the Vampire. Continuing to read Varney. This just goes on, this Penny Dreadful. Probably the most popular Penny Dreadful that ran for a long, long time in Victorian England. So not really a novel, more of an ongoing soap opera starring Varney the Vampire. And the initial storyline where Varney was trying to terrorize the Bannerworth family so that he could get into their house and find some money that was hidden away in there, that storyline is pretty much finished. And Varney apparently found the money and moved on. Yes, I am giving Varney the Vampire spoilers. Some viewers gave me a hard time last time I talked about Varney for giving spoilers. Come on, man. You're not going to read this. Who are you trying to fool? I'm going to continue to give Varney the Vampire spoilers as I read this because, you know what? Tough luck. And you're not going to read it anyway, so who are you trying to kid? Anyway, the storyline has moved on to a new storyline where we have a mysterious baron who is probably Varney, who just showed up one day to this place with a bunch of money and ran into a vampire who knew his secret. So a vampire shows up in here. The Baron kills the vampire. So either the Baron is really Varney or the vampire that he meets was Varney. I think the Baron is Varney, although we haven't gotten official confirmation yet as far as I've gotten to in this story. One thing about vampires at this time. So when this was written, a lot of the rules for vampires hadn't been made up yet, the ones that we're familiar with. And at this time, you could kill a vampire pretty much in any old way. And like the Baron kills this vampire in here just by slitting his throat. But the one thing we know about vampires, other than that they drink blood, although you don't really see much of that in this, if you leave a vampire's body and it outside or something and it gets exposed to moonlight, then the vampire comes back to life. You know, you could kill him, but if you leave him out and his body is touched by moonlight, it's going to come right back as good as new. And that's, of course, what happens to this vampire who is troubling the Baron. He's put into a tomb, but he's not buried. He's just left out in the tomb. And I guess there's a window in the tomb. And some moonlight gets in, and, well, you know what happens. So we do have some vampire shenanigans going on right now in the story. Although, like I said, not a lot of the drinking of blood. This doesn't happen hardly ever. And I'm hundreds of pages into this book. So, we'll see. Varney the Vampire continues. Continue to read this. Also reading some other stuff. I am continuing to read the Fantastic Four because I'm reading every issue of the Fantastic Four from the first run of the Fantastic Four, which ran from 1961 to 1996. I think, yes. When the whole Heroes Reborn thing happened and the title was canceled and then it came right back with a new #1 issue a month later. But I'm reading the first run, and I'm at this point now. I have read 157 issues and annuals and giant size issues. This epic collection here has had some giant size Fantastic Four issues. So Stan Lee left the book. Jack Kirby left the book. John Buscema came and left. And so for a lot of this epic collection, the stories were written by Jerry Conway and illustrated by Rich Buckler. Now, if you just look at this, you think, that must be John Buscema, but it's not. It's Rich Buckler. Rich Buckler's actually, he's a pretty good artist, and he's good on the Fantastic Four. It's just that he doesn't have a style of his own. He seems to be he's like a combination of Jack Kirby mostly and John Buscema. He's like a weird combination of those two, although he's not as good as either of those two. And as far as I know, he never developed a style of his own. He's always looking like someone else. In this case, like Jack Kirby or John Buscema. But within those bounds, he's pretty good. He's pretty good. I have to give him that. Jerry Conway, however, despite having some interesting ideas, is not the best writer in the world at this point in his career on the Fantastic Four. And he wrote, so far, the worst issue of the Fantastic Four that I've ever read, which would be issue 149. This issue was perpetrated by Jerry Conway. And so at this point, the Invisible Woman and Mr. Fantastic, who are married, are estranged. And she wants to divorce him. And she runs off with the Submariner. And the Submariner decides to invade New York, along with the Invisible Woman. And by the end of the story, it turns out it was all a ruse. The Submariner wasn't really invading New York. He just wanted to bring Sue Storm and Reed Richards back together again. And this is how he did it, by pretending to invade New York along with Sue Storm. It's all so incredibly stupid. First of all, why would he even do this? Why would he bother? He wouldn't. It's all so dumb. I have to say, Jerry Conway, not very good when it comes to writing anything having to do with interpersonal relationships. But you know what? I don't blame him for that issue. I don't blame him. He was very young, early in his career. He's writing the Fantastic Four. I think he was doing his best. And, he definitely got better over time. I blame the editor, who at the time, the editor was Roy Thomas, right? For that issue. I think he was, Roy Thomas was the editor at the time. And he should not have let that storyline pass. He just shouldn't have. Eventually, Roy Thomas comes back to write the book. And the book immediately becomes much, much better. As soon as Roy Thomas takes over the storyline, or takes over the stories, they just get really, really good. In fact, I just read issue 157, and the ending of this issue is so good, even I won't spoil it, just in case you read it. It's excellent. Altogether, Fantastic Four is still fantastic. Just some of those issues by Jerry Conway. But like I said, Roy Thomas gets the book back and starts writing it again, and it's great. Also I read this. This is DC Finest Superman, the first superhero. I finished this up. These early adventures of Superman, which I just read like a year and a half ago. But I read them again. And they're even better this time when I read them. So great stuff. If you've never read these early Superman stories, the Golden Age Superman, when Superman first burst upon the scene, if you've never read these, and you're a comic book fan, you really got to read them. And this is pretty cheap. It's $40, which for how many pages is this? 600 pages almost? Yeah, it's 580 pages about. So that's a good deal. That's a good deal for this book. It's really, really good. And right now, for DC, because I always have to read something DC, I'm reading this DC Finest volume, Wonder Woman, Origins and Omens, which is the Gail Simone run, or the beginning of the Gail Simone run on Wonder Woman, which I've never read. I've never read this, if you can believe it. And it's excellent. This is excellent, which, is all I ever hear about this run. but it's really, really good. So I'm enjoying Wonder Woman, Origins and Omens. I haven't got too far in it, but enjoying what I've been reading. It's pretty great. Couple other things. In the mail, I got a couple awesome things. First of all, Pat from Book Chat with Pat. I will link her channel down below. Pat sent me something for Christmas. She sent me something, which was completely awesome. Thank you, Pat. She sent me this. This is the Dracula pop-up book. It's a pop-up book of Dracula. You open it up and things pop out. It's a pop-up book. It's awesome. And it actually tells the story of Dracula. If you, on the sides here, if I can get this thing and hold it, it has like little pages on the sides that actually tell the story of Dracula. And let me tell you, it's actually a pretty good adaptation of Dracula. Here we got Jonathan Harker trying to kill Dracula in his coffin. Doesn't have much luck there. And here, this is pretty cool. My little dog Rhonda is represented in this book, and she is popping out of this book. An exact duplicate of my little dog Rhonda. That's pretty amazing. And we've got this big house here with the bat lurking on top. I mean, this is just awesome. And it was cool. So, of course, I had to sit right down and read this whole thing. Because, like I said, it does tell an actual story on the edges here with these little pop-out pages. It's great. Here's Dancing Dracula. Dancing Dracula. You know, this was awesome. And so I read this whole thing. It took, about 10 minutes or less because I was busy playing with the pop-ups. But it was great. And then I realized, hey, I didn't buy this book. This book was a gift. I didn't buy it, and I own it. So it counts for the 500 book challenge. How about that? So this is book 205 right there. Hey, if 2 volumes of this can count as one book, then this can count as a book. I'm just saying. I didn't buy it. Book 205 right here. Thanks, Pat. And if you saw my box of goodies that I got from my friend Mark the other day, you'll see that Mark sent me some CDs from Dark Adventure Radio Theater, which is something that's produced by the H.P. Lovecraft Historical Society. And one of the things that he sent was The Rats in the Walls. This is the only one I've had a chance to listen to, and it was excellent. It was excellent. And it also has extra cool goodies in here, along with the CD. We have a menu from House Delapore, a little menu if you ever want to go. Don't eat at the Delapore place. Don't do that. We have a burnt piece of the document that was supposed to tell the forbidden secrets of the Delapores, but it was burnt up during the Civil War. But I do have this one section which was just, it was just left behind among these things. And probably my favorite thing that they put in here with this CD is this little newspaper cutting here, where it actually has a photograph of Exham Priory right there, lurking on the side of this cliff. That was really cool. I mean, there's some good stuff in here. So that was actually an excellent CD radio performance that was done by Dark Adventure Radio Theater. I loved it. I thought it was great. I look forward to listening to the others. Apparently, they did quite a few of those, apparently. So, yeah, that was cool. That was a good time. So, I should shut up now because I've talked for a long, long time. It's almost been 25 minutes. But you know what? It's been 2 weeks since I've done one of these. I will catch you next time.